Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Fitting that we have you on, Max, for a remote episode, a Good in the Room episode, but as also our Grand Rapids tour guide, because Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins is on January 17th. It's coming up quickly. GriffinsHockey.com/WWP to get your tickets. The last batch is available. Like, we can't, it's not like the Red Wings events. Once those tickets and pieces of co-branded merch are done, they're done. So get yours today. But Max, we're going to have a third try at this whole go to the restaurants that Max recommends things.
I tried last time, but I forgot the name and type of restaurant and just gaslit Max into saying I went to the place he told me to go.
I'm going to need to try to get down there again and just actually like chaperone these visits so that I make sure that they happen.
Everything else about these events, like the pre-game live show with Dan Watson and Grand Rapids Griffins players. Last year we had Lombardi. That goes great. The game goes great. The post-game stuff that we do, all of that is awesome, but we cannot be trusted to just follow a set of instructions beforehand in the city. And I blame it on the fact that it's such an amazing city to go to. Like, what other reason do you need to go see Griffins hockey other than a historic start, which we're going to talk about today? But even if they were terrible at hockey, or if there's no hockey team, Van Andel didn't exist, that is a top-tier hidden gem city in the United States.
I'm biased. I think it's got to be, if not the best, certainly a top 3 minor league city in terms of like sports teams. Like, if you're in the AHL, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, San Diego is on that list, so that's obviously in there. But there's not really any other places that I would put above it, although I am extremely biased.
And Evan and I have hit, the 13th through the 18th best restaurants and bars, but 1 through 12 eludes us.
No doubt.
We're gonna do our best this time, Max. All right, folks. Remote episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. We hope you had a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Here for one last show in 2025. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
I'm Max Bultman.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking about the 2 Detroit Red Wings games that have happened, the gutsy win against the Dallas Stars, and last night's loss to the Carolina Hurricanes, which was one of the more lopsided affairs of the year. It's probably going to be a quick conversation. And then some different looks at the Red Wings, a year in review under Todd McLellan, how December has gone as we are looking into wrapping up 2025, some conversations about scoring and 5-on-5 rates versus power play and odd man situations. And then we're going to be taking a look at some things that Max has talked about on the Athletic Detroit, talking about a potential trade target, revisiting a conversation we had with Max the last episode, or maybe the episode before, on, just what to do with John Gibson and other Red Wings. We're going to get into the Grand Rapids Griffins historic start continuing and whatever else we get into before overtime. Very quickly, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We let loose, we have fun. You get bloopers, thoughts with Evan, all of that, and lots more. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaway. For example, we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And one more time, griffinshockey.com/WWP, or go to the link in the description to get your tickets to Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins. Pre-game live recording the Winged Wheel Podcast, co-branded Grand Rapids Griffins Winged Wheel Podcast merch. It's a signed puck, a limited edition puck, and it's signed by a mystery Griffins player, a random one for each puck. And you get obviously tickets to the Griffins versus Milwaukee game that night. So again, griffinshockey.com/WWP. Dallas in Detroit, last one before the Christmas break, and everyone had that one circled as this is a litmus test game. Not that Detroit hadn't been playing good teams beforehand, but when they played Washington twice in a row, Washington's part of this chaotic Eastern Conference where nothing really makes sense. The Dallas Stars are a good hockey team, and they've been playing good hockey, and they've been a good hockey team for years. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This was going to be a measuring stick for Detroit. And I have to say that game had everything in both directions, but I came away pretty optimistic about Detroit's chances, not just because they got the win. I thought they acquitted themselves quite well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Casey DeSmith was in net instead of Jake Ottinger, right? So we should preface all this with that. But I think what's encouraging is you saw the way they came out in the first period and they were all over Dallas. That was as good a period against a good team as the Red Wings have. Well, like actually 2 games earlier against Washington, you could say the same thing, which again, an encouraging trend that they're putting together these really impressive 5-on-5 periods against top teams. But they weren't scoring really. And so that was the concern is like, okay, you had this great period and, Dallas comes out and really swung things back. I think the Red Wings, what was it, 1-0 after 1 here? We're a few days in the past now here. But
yep.
Yeah, 1-0 after 1. Dallas comes back and you're like, okay, well, it was a good push, but now it's good time to see if they can come back against a team that is one of the league's elite, that is adept at locking it down. And they were able to. And so I think body of work wise, maybe their best win of the season. It's at home, it's before a break, but the before a break thing can kind of cut both ways. We've seen the Red Wings struggle with those games right before some time off in the past. And so I know that was an emphasis from Todd McLellan. And for me, even with Ottinger not in that game, it's a real, test pass for the Red Wings, I thought.
So as Max alluded to, Detroit started scoring 1-0 in the first period. JVR scored his 9th of the year. It was off a great play, honestly, from Michael Rasmussen, who's been one of the better Red Wings over the past little while here, including the next game against Carolina. Rasmussen kind of does it all himself. JVR just cleans it up in front. Edvinsson gets a secondary assist, and Detroit comes out of the first period feeling pretty good. The second period was all Dallas. Like, nothing else to say other than Detroit was pretty fortunate. That was only 2 goals against. Rupe Hintz and Jamie Benn both scored. And Detroit found themselves down 1 after 2 periods, but that was a very, very lopsided affair. And then you saw them grind it out. You saw them tough it out. They didn't throw in the towel. They understood that the game was only 1 goal away, and they didn't, let the fact that they were being outplayed get away from them. And you saw them kind of regroup between periods. Emmett Finnie scored on the power play, a rebound, Raymond and Seider assisting. Emmett Finnie's 9th of the season. Wyatt Johnston scored his 20th on the power play as well, made it 3-2. So again, Dallas took the lead once more. And then with under 5 minutes to play, Dylan Larkin scores his 19th of the season off of one of the most electric assists we've seen all season from JVR in his, area next to the net, facing away from Larkin, facing the end boards, between the legs, backwards pass, no look to Dylan Larkin in front, who bangs it home. And JVR, man, what else could you want or expect from this guy in a depth role? He has been beyond phenomenal. Like that's an all-time dude right there who just made that pass.
Well, I think the key right there is what had happened 4 or 5 minutes before that as well. Yeah. So you talk about the Johnston goal. That's a power play goal. It comes off a penalty behind the Dallas net that JVR takes that he did not need to take. You never need to take a ticky-tack penalty, a holding in this case, 200 feet from your own net, right? And he's a veteran, and you don't really expect that from him. Now, he had been injured earlier in that game. I think he had taken a shot off of the leg, if I'm remembering right. And so I'm wondering if it was like he's not moving that well and he's trying to, forecheck, whatever the case. It's a penalty that I'm sure the Red Wings coaching staff was like, what is going on here? This is the least dangerous area of the ice for the Red Wings, and you're taking a holding penalty there. This is like the mental toughness and the veteran stuff that you want to see from a guy who has played as many NHL games as JVR, as he comes back out there and he makes the play of the game. Like you said, a beautiful between the legs pass on the power play and completely makes up for it, right? And so that was the key swing in the game for me, because when I saw the penalty get taken, we've all seen enough hockey to know that Dallas was scoring on that power play. Like, that is how that goes. You take a penalty like that, you're going to pay for it. And for almost every Red Wings team since the existence of this podcast, that's the game-winning goal, and that's the whole premise of this show the next day, basically. But they rally, and specifically for the guy who took that penalty to come back and be the one who makes the amazing play to make up for it. I thought that was the story of the game for me, pretty much.
And then the only challenge to that would be Dylan Larkin in overtime from Seider and Raymond scoring his 20th of the season, blowing the roof off the Pizza Arena. The overtime winner, pulls this to the middle. Really nice play, and Detroit wins it in a 4-3 win that looked unlikely like 10 minutes of play earlier.
What's interesting to me is I felt like he's been quiet of late. And so like for him to, he had been going so well through this whole season, right? He's on pace for 40 goals. But the last 7-8 games prior to this Dallas game, he hadn't looked, the top line as a whole, I'm sure we'll talk about this as the show goes on, hadn't looked quite as dominant. They've been getting it from other places. And so in a moment with your back against the wall, your captain's the guy who, you know, a JVR makes the play on the tying goal, but your captain finishes it, and then he comes out in overtime, and he was not going to be denied in overtime. Like, it was pretty clear from early in that OT that Dylan Larkin was going to make a play, and he does fairly quickly. And so that's exactly what you need from your captain. It's exactly what you need from your best player, your leading scorer. Yeah, it was a Dylan Larkin night for sure.
I thought his post-game comments were really nothing like mind-blowing or earth-shattering either, but he was pretty poignant when asked about like the atmosphere in the LCA. And this time last year, they just had that loss to St. Louis, and, you know, Derek Lalonde was about to be fired and they got booed off the ice. And he was like, yeah, pretty much we sucked. Like, the product on the ice is way better this year. Fans are, you know, happier to come see this. Like, this is a big difference. And we're glad to be putting on, you know, a show for these fans who deserve this kind of hockey. And like, we are a way better team. We sucked last year and we are way better this year. I laughed. It was all true. We know it. The players know it. The team, you know, management knows it. But it's funny to see him just kind of cut through the hockey speak of, oh yeah, you know, you never want to feel what it feels like to get booed off the ice. So you just got to put in the work. He's like, no, yeah, it's a way better product on the ice this year. It's worth the money.
For my money, that game was it's ultimately Derek Lalonde's last game, right? But that was the low point of last season. You watched it, and I think I wrote a column there that was like, something has to change here, because I did not know that was coming. But like, it was just very clear that this was a team that was not in it, and it was going to be a really long second half if they didn't find something to change. Whether that was, I think that was before Dylan Cousins had been traded, right? And so you're wondering, like, you know, yeah, is that the rumors I think were out there by then, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
My timeline, right? So it's like, okay, something like that. You got to find something for a spark. They end up going the coaching route. It ends up being hugely successful in the right move. Maybe not as successful as they perfect world, you get into the playoffs or whatever, but over the body of work of a year, it's a night and day difference. And so, yeah, you're right to point that out, that was like a notable thing from Larkin, because to go from how bad it was last Christmas, and it just looked like it was going to be a really, really long second half for all involved, and including like with him, right? Like, I mean, he's a guy that the second half of last year, I think, left you wanting more, and especially really after the Four Nations. And so like, he gets the 2 goals. That matters too.
Yeah, especially playing against a team like Dallas. We talked about them being, you know, a test game for how good really is this team. And we've talked about Andrew Copp's been playing really well on the second line. JVR has stepped up. Michael Rasmussen's playing the best hockey he's played all year. Those guys aren't going to beat the Dallas Stars, even at their best. That's just not realistic. You need a Dylan Larkin or a Lucas Raymond or an Alex DeBrincat to take over the game to beat a team of that caliber. So even though I agreed to what you said earlier, I don't think Dylan's looked like himself lately, but he sure did that game. And without it, they don't beat the Stars.
So everyone feels great, as Max said, leading the division, co-lead for the conference heading into Christmas break. And coming out of it was a game for the conference lead. And it was the Red Wings in Carolina. So they head to Raleigh, and another kind of measuring stick game. It was never going to be easy. These last batch of games for the Red Wings had a lot of tough tests. And against Carolina, like, we'll get into some details here, but the gist of this game is the Carolina Hurricanes are and continue to be a force. They did not look rusty at all coming out of the break. They were playing remarkably solid system hockey. Individual execution was there, even despite missing some of their best players. Like, there was no Seth Jarvis in this one. And the Red Wings looked at the exact same time as Carolina looked at the top of their game. The Red Wings looked, as they have been at points, rusty, unprepared, you know, slow off the blocks. And the real fortunate thing for them is that they even had an opportunity in the third period. I think even though Carolina, they ultimately put a bunch past John Gibson kept them in it for way longer than the Red Wings should have been in it.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Wings have struggled with Carolina over the last several years. I think they're 2-8 in their last 10 against the Hurricanes now. Like, that tells you that this was always going to be a tough one. And if you look around the league, road teams did not have a great night last night coming out of the Christmas break. There were some winners, right? Tampa won on the road at Florida. Washington won on the road. Minnesota won on the road. Colorado won on the road. These are all top teams in the league. They all needed overtime, I'll add. Chicago did beat Dallas on the road, and San Jose beat Vancouver. So it wasn't, a home sweep, but home teams did pretty well, and road teams, even in cases where you expect them to win, in some cases needed overtime. So, like, you looked at those two combinations, the circumstance and the opponent. I think all four of us would have unanimously picked a Hurricanes win last night. But yeah, I mean, it's another lopsided shot total, right? And I think that's an interesting thing that the Red Wings, they've transitioned under McLellan to getting much more volume and doing much better kind of territorially, possession-wise. Carolina's still the king of it, though. And I think you saw last night, the Hurricanes are still the class of the East, right? I mean, the Lightning probably right there with them. But wherever the Red Wings are in the standings, like, I don't think anyone can say that the Hurricanes and the Lightning are not the top two teams in this conference and the teams you're expecting at the end of it all. The Red Wings, frankly, for me, it's still just about proving they can get in before, even in first place in the division. That's where my mindset's at.
Yeah, and I like the Hurricanes as a stylistic matchup for Detroit. Not in the sense it's good for Detroit. I think they're the worst possible matchup for Detroit, but just to see where they're at, because Detroit doesn't play the exact same style as Carolina, but they've definitely tilted more that direction under McLellan. But like Max said, Carolina's the masters at it, and they really, really push Detroit's pace, which is, I think, an area they struggle. Outside of a 2 or 3 guys, they don't have a lot of guys who play a high pace, high speed game. And you get up against a team like Carolina where it's high volume, high action, there's something constantly happening. And the Red Wings, based on the 2-8 in the last 10, do not react to it well. So even though they still had a chance in the third period, I agree, it didn't feel like they were ever really in that game. And as improved as they are, you can still see clearly that gap of, okay, we've gotten to here now, but this is what it looks like. And this is where we're going to struggle, because it's pace. It's the Carolina Hurricanes hockey. It's why, like, you'll see Detroit beat Tampa all the time, even though Tampa's a far superior team, just because stylistically that's not nearly as bad of a matchup as Carolina is. So, it's learning to win in a lot of ways, and Detroit's done that, but there's still a gap between this type of pace and normal hockey pace.
Carolina is the team that the Red Wings basically are trying to become, I mean, in a lot of different ways. Their build is the most similar to how the Red Wings are built, with a couple of like elite two-way defensemen at the top of things, or at least they have been historically. Pesci's moved on since, but kind of those prime Hurricanes teams, or maybe now is the prime, I don't know, but of recent years, that's how I've always envisioned, like, if things go very well for the Red Wings, that's what it could look like. Larkin as Sebastian Aho, Lucas Raymond as kind of either your Seth Jarvis, or it could be your Andrei Svechnikov kind of thing, right? But there's not that one defining star on the team. And if there is, it's a two-way defenseman who probably doesn't get enough love nationally, and Jacob Slavin and Moritz Seider, right? So I've always felt like Carolina is the team they should be emulating, and stylistically under McLellan, they have emulated them. And you just see that, it's big brother, little brother in that matchup.
So Detroit actually opened scoring that game, believe it or not, and it was from, again, one of the best Red Wings right now in terms of how he's playing relative to what we've seen. Michael Rasmussen, he takes advantage of a JT Compher pass that came off a turnover. Rasmussen in the slot high danger area, and just he rips it home. He beats Bussy, and Detroit goes up 1-0. There's Evan. He just woke up. I was wondering when he was.
Who?
You said his trigger word.
That's right. The sleeper agent. I'm sorry. That was so immature of me, but we had to get it out of the way, and I was like, we this is easier than a text to Evan, say, eyes open, pal. Detroit goes up 1-0, and the Carolina had, how many shots was that in the first period? 15. And I think one of them, the 15th or 14th, was a breakaway opportunity that John Gibson saved with his glove, which is notable in and of itself. And Detroit escapes with a 1-0 lead in that first. Everyone's feeling good. Everyone, I think, recognizes that they got thoroughly outplayed, but they had a chance, thanks to John Gibson. Then the game got away. It was Jackson Blake, Eric Robinson, and Shane Gostisbehere. And Shane Gostisbehere looked excellent against his former team, I should add. He was all over the board. And Detroit's down 3-1 after 2 periods. The only reprieve came off a power play goal from Andrew Copp, from John Leonard, and Axel Sandin-Pellikka. Beautiful tic-tac-toe play from all three of them. And that brought Detroit within one, even though they weren't, a within one kind of team that night. They still had a chance. And Detroit had some key opportunities. Dylan Larkin had a breakaway that the puck just sailed on him when he tried to go a quick backhand roof. It just went a mile over the net. Seider had a big opportunity. Carolina ends up going up 4-2, and it was off a play where, Dylan Larkin had a chance, blew a tire at the wrong time. Carolina takes advantage, and they rightfully win that game. They end up with a 5-2 win after the empty netter. And it's a testament to the fact that the Red Wings, much like the Dallas game, were gutting it out, forgetting what the previous 40 minutes were and just looking at the scoreboard. But that game ultimately was a result of the Red Wings being unprepared, and I think the level of execution was lower than the Dallas game. And they also missed, JVR wasn't in this game. He was out of the lineup. They continued to miss Patrick Kane. And say what you want about a team that is going to be worse because those two guys are missing in this year of our Lord 2025, but it did affect the Red Wings. And I think you could see it, that compounded with some other things that we'll talk about in a minute here with the lineup. But yeah, I think what you said at the beginning, Max, was right. This was a circled loss on the calendar. Brad is correct. I think I really resonate with what he said about this team has come a long way, and this isn't automatically a circled loss the way it was in years past, but this shows that they still have work to do.
Well, after the first period, you're up 1-0, and it's kind of the Ralph Wiggum meme. Ha ha ha! I'm in danger. Like that's what it is when you're in Carolina up 1-0 and the shots are tilted the way they are, right? But it's interesting with Kane. I feel like he's not a guy that in this particular style of game makes the difference. Like Carolina, of all the guys on the Red Wings, he's the guy who Carolina is the toughest matchup for. Just suffocating defensively, up and down pace, right? Like. Outside of a power play where Patrick Kane is always the X factor, and the Red Wings power play was okay last night. Didn't get too many chances, but 1 for 2, you'll always take that. JVR, I think, is the one where you have the size, the net front. You just create some chaos around a young goaltender, and that's the one that maybe makes a difference. But even then, even though he has shown some bursts of speed, you can't be looking to 37, 38-year-olds to be your difference makers in a game that's going to have this kind of up and down typically.
Well, what do you have against 37, 38-year-olds, Max? There's not really nice over the holidays.
How much time do you have?
No. As a 38-year-old who still skates regularly, Max is objectively correct. The pace and speed is gone.
You and JVR both have that youthful baby face where you look like forever a teenager, but he does have a little bit of size on you, Brad. I hate to say it.
No doubt. And again, like Kane on the power play, JVR at the net, those are always possibilities to make your day if you're a Red Wings fan, right? That's why they're that's why they're at this level. That's why they're, in the roles they're at. That's what they're there for. But when I think Carolina, I think up and down, I think tight checking, I think you're not in the middle of the ice as much as you want to be. And that's why they're a tough matchup, right? It's not a criticism of not being able to solve it. That's why they've been one of the best teams in the NHL for 5-6 years running now.
So that's a loss for Detroit. Breaks a little win streak there. They had 3 games go on. We are recording this on Sunday morning, bright and early tonight. So Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, the Leafs head into Detroit. It's going to be an interesting matchup. The Leafs have had a curious season, to say the least. It's not been going their way, although they're hoping to ride, a small hot wave here, and then the Red Wings wrap up 2025 on New Year's Eve against the Winnipeg Jets, also at home at the LCA. So those are the 2 upcoming games. You'll probably know the results of the Leafs game by the time you listen to this, and then we'll be back with you on New Year's Day. Come hell or high water, we'll see how 3 of us are doing. But that's what the Red Wings have coming up. There was a really good conversation on the FanDuel Sports Detroit broadcast. We should actually say first, happy belated birthday to Mickey Redmond. It was very fun to watch Ken Daniels give him that cake. It said 20 because, yes, the number, but also, forever 20 years old. We don't have to worry about, how old we are. And Mickey's, if there's anyone who's forever young, it's Mickey Redmond. So fun to see them celebrate him. But they also talked about 1 year of Todd McLellan. So the 365 days when he came in, Detroit was, I think it was 48, 31, and 7. So 599 points percentage in the 365 days since he came in. So it was 11th best. Yeah, 11th best in the NHL since December 27th, 2024. So that's about as good as you could have hoped for. Even beyond that, if you had asked Red Wings fans, and Max, I think about our conversation after the St. Louis game in 2024, we're sitting in the concourse talking about, yeah, something's got to change. And, you were writing your piece and I was like, yeah, we're going to go on the pod and like that's it. If you had set a 599 points percentage from that point on under a new coach, a lot of people would very rightfully have called us insane. So this has been a almost miraculous turnaround for the Red Wings.
Yep, and 97 points in his first 82 games with the Red Wings. That's a playoff team most years, certainly in recent years in the Eastern Conference, that'll get you in. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, they did not make the playoffs this past year, and we have yet to see if they will make the playoffs in 2026. That is the key barometer that everyone should be using to judge this. But that pace over 82 games is encouraging. It's a positive trend. And we'll see if they can bring it home now. But there's been a lot that's changed. I did a long story on this last week as well. And in addition to some of the obvious things, I think play style wise, you see them be more assertive. You see them be a little more direct. I think their defending has improved. And that's the thing I'm most interested in is he came in and the play effing hockey, right? That's the quote from that first practice. And a lot of it was about instinctiveness and playing free. And there's always a limit to that, right? Like you do that to kind of get the team back and get them playing again, just kind of creatively. But there's always a kind of push and pull to that, reining it in. And I think the key barometer that tells me the Red Wings are in a good place is that they've been able to do that without going back to the mechanical and the robotic, right? They've been able to rein it in and find the defensive game as well, the structure as well, the game management as well. And it hasn't cost them some of those same instincts and creativity that were so key when he came in. So I think that's a fine line to walk. And it was the thing I was most curious to see from that first day. It's like, yeah, it's great to talk about play free and, use your instincts and, just react. But coaches are always going to want to put guys in structure. And the fact that the Red Wings have been able to do that, I think is my biggest takeaway from year one.
Well, it also depends where, right? Because even when I'm coaching, the little guys I coach, I always phrase them, the defensive zone is mine. What I say is what you're going to do. We're going to have 2 in net front, 2 on the puck, 1 for sport, and very, very structured in the D zone. But the rule I have with them is once you cross that red line, now is time to flex your creativity. And I think that's probably what Todd was getting at is there was no creativity with the puck. So I think that's what the play effing hockey was. Just make plays, guys. Like, if everybody knows exactly what you're going to do every time you cross the blue line, nothing's going to happen because you're easy to defend. But the Red Wings, because they were horrible last year, had just as big a problem in the D zone where they were breaking structure too much because they weren't good. And I think Todd's done a pretty good job of not just instilling a slightly different system, because I still remember that Lalonde quote, every team just plays a different version of the same system, and he's right. But McLellan's got more buy-in, more aggressiveness to it, more clarification of roles, I think is also a big thing, where, in position X, Y, or Z, in situation A, B, or C, this is what you do. And you can see a little more predictability with the Red Wings defending this year. So it's just that finding that combination of creativity with the puck, discipline without the puck. And I think McLellan's done a really good job of that.
And the one area in the D zone that it would apply, like I think back to the Utah game a few games ago, and McLellan talked about how guys are in the right spots, but they're not doing the job, right? And that's where it would apply to something like that, right? If you're playing mechanically in the defensive zone, yeah, you're in the right place, but you see something shift or you see a guy move and you go, well, I'm in my spot. No, you got to be a competitor, play hockey, go get in his face, tie his stick up, whatever. That, I think, is an area where it would apply in the D zone too, right? It's like you got to use your instincts beyond just knowing my feet are where my feet are supposed to be. Well, what else is going on around you, right? And so I think that's the other side to that coin. But I do agree. I think, the Red Wings, like they have Patrick Kane on their roster. Alex DeBrincat is having one of his better years in the NHL. Like they are not keep taking the creativity out of these guys. But it is like, just make sure that the job is done the way the job needs to be done. And then, make a play when it's time to make a play.
I think there's also a sense of belief that they can actually compete and be a good team now. Whereas, 1 year ago at this time, I don't think confidence could have been any lower inside and outside the organization. But now that Todd's come in and, like Brad said, clarified things and, just simply stated what needs to be done, and they've kind of let rookies decide their fate in this lineup. It's build some confidence and help build some belief that, yeah, we're good players. And now it's starting to come to fruition. So every game the Red Wings can be in your defensive zone, you believe that other guys are going to be where they need to be and catching their assignments. So it's a stark difference what 365 days have made to the Detroit Red Wings.
It's a great point. And that was really the other buzzword of that first day. I remember almost everyone said something about team spirit, and that was not a word that I was expecting to hear that day. But in hindsight, it was maybe the most important one. So yeah, very, very good point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that point is like, it's less about the X's and O's that you guys pointed out, and I think just as poignant and important. And those two things aren't completely divorced. It's not like the systems and the, team spirit and self-belief were two different lessons from Todd that he did independently of one another. One begets the other for sure. But to what Evan was saying, like this team, whether you want to admit it or not, or whether you like it or not, it was very affected by, the mental game. You saw them get down in the dumps. You saw them down and out. And sure, if they got thoroughly outplayed, like let's say they did against Carolina and to a different degree Dallas, most games, as Max said, like that whatever goal would have been the game winner, and Detroit would have just put themselves out of it, even if they had 20, 40, 45 minutes left to play. And what Todd McLellan has done, not completely, they still have a long way to go, but he has instilled in them the belief that they can hang in games and win games, and he's taught them that you can, if you win a game, you get more goals than the other team. It's 2 points on the board, whether you're the better team that night or not. It does not matter. You need to hang in it. And that's what playoff teams do. That's what cup competitive teams do. That's what teams who not only have the good players, but have the execution and they play like a team do. And that was a lesson, and that was a knowledge that was missing from this team. Like Dylan Larkin could be as good of a player as he was last year. He was one of the players, I think, who was missing that. He wanted it. He knew what he wanted, but the whole team was missing that sense of, how do we get there? How do we convert having better players into points on the board? And that's why you could almost see, like, think of early days Patrick Kane. You can kind of see a bewilderment on his face of like, what are these kids doing? Like, and that's a guy who's been there and done that on teams who knew how to win. And slowly but surely, I think what McLellan and his staff have done, and credit to the Red Wings players too, has brought into them that knowledge of, here's how you win when you're good and feeling it, but here's how you scrounge up points even when things aren't going your way, which in an 82, soon to be 84 game hockey season is going to be a lot of the time.
It's interesting. We've talked a lot about on the show, and you guys have when I'm not here as well, about Moritz Seider, and he's probably the most likely Red Wings related person to get awards votes this year. But I think Todd McLellan would be right there with him, right? And it's Patrick Waugh in New York, Joel Quenneville obviously in Anaheim. McLellan top 3, top 5 for Coach of the Year right now? I mean,
depends where they finish. That award is team we did better than expected.
Yeah.
And I think everybody had Detroit around the periphery of a playoff. So if they get in as the 8th seed, I don't think anybody would be truly shocked. But if the Red Wings somehow hold on to one of these divisional seeds, I think he would get a very long look at first place on a few ballots.
I would have so much respect lost for the Jack Adams voting if he isn't a finalist, if the Red Wings end up in a divisional seed or even taking the Atlantic, like to go a step further. Because, I mean, there's probably a lack of newness to Todd McLellan because he was in for partial, 2024, 2025 season. But what else could you need to get that voting? That's a great point, Max, and one that we haven't talked about enough.
And it's not like the Red Wings were this team that was just waiting to light the fuse and be a rocket ship to the moon. Like, this team was at the bottom of the bottom, and there really, at least the fans, felt like there was no hope in sight. And now the team has completely turned it around. So, it's not just bringing in better players or letting the rookies make the team and help push this team to be better. It's a total culture shift in the locker room, and that can't be for nothing.
Well, thankful for 1 year of Todd McLellan. Hopefully the Red Wings close out this calendar year well. There's going to be a lot more on the Red Wings and some storylines about their scoring rates, both good and bad, after this. But first, a word from our sponsors. All right, quick sidebar, because this is one of those things that people don't love talking about, but everyone does notice it eventually. Hair loss doesn't just show up all at once. It's gradual, it's subtle, it's like one of those games that's really slow until something actually happens. One day you're fine, the next you're making little adjustments and pretending you're not, and that ends up messing with your confidence. That's why HIMS makes sense. HIMS gives you access to licensed medical providers and personalized care for hair loss, all through simple online processes. No guessing, no bouncing between solutions, just a clear plan built around what actually works. Through HIMS, you can get access to proven ingredients that can help stop further hair loss and even regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months if you're prescribed. It's structured, it's straightforward, just like a coach who comes in and puts in a solid game, and it fits into your routine, not the other way around. There are no hidden fees, no surprise costs, just personalized care that helps you get back to playing your game, steady, prepared, and not thinking about it every time you walk past a mirror. For simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/wingedwheel. That's hims.com/wingedwheel for your free online visit. hims.com/wingedwheel. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Featured products include compounded drug products which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Welcome back. All right, we touched on this a couple times in the first segment here, but the Red Wings have had some a little bit papered over, a little bit hidden, interesting scoring situations, and I should call them scoring issues. And we've talked about in previous episodes, both with and without you on, Max, about how Marco Kasper could maybe get going by getting on that first line with Larkin and Raymond. And he did to start the third period, at least last night, he was on that line. But the other half of that conversation is that top line and various other spots in the Red Wings lineup haven't been scoring 5-on-5 or producing 5-on-5 at rates that you would want to see. They've kind of cooled off. I know you mentioned it earlier, Max, but if you think about the Dallas game, the way Larkin scored on the power play, then in 3-on-3, and then Raymond tallying up all those assists in this process, you're not really going to go out there and point that out in a win where they didn't need to score a 5-on-5. They scored on the power play. They scored on the 3-on-3 with all that wide open space. But at some point, you do have to think about this because sustainability over an 82-game season is going to come into play and everything will average out. And it does look like the Red Wings have had some, even strength production issues. So what do we make of this?
Yeah, it's interesting. So after the Utah loss, I asked McLellan about a couple of power plays in the second when it was a 1-goal game. I thought the first power play in particular was really flat, didn't generate anything. And he wasn't in the mood to talk about it. He was like, nope, it's 5-on-5. We had 0 5-on-5 goals. That's the story of this game. And clearly that was on his mind. And so when I looked this morning to see okay, so what is it like in December 5? Now that's granted one game, but I agree with you. It feels like it's been a trend, especially for that top line. I went and looked this morning, and they are 11th in 5-on-5 expected goals per 60 in the month of December and 9th in 5-on-5 goals per 60 in December. So that surprised me. It doesn't anecdotally feel that way. I mean, there are some games that'll skew that. I think the road game at Washington, they were excellent. In Chicago, they were excellent 5-on-5. So that those obviously can bump your numbers up a little bit. I don't know. Am I off, Brad? I was not expecting them to be in the top half of the league in either of those stats.
I think it's just a shift in what we've been accustomed to because, the Red Wings have scored enough this year, but that's been so heavily on the top, I was going to say top 5 of this four group, but really top 3, whoever's playing on the top line at any given moment, plus Alex DeBrincat. DeBrincat's been a little quieter as of late. Larkin's been a little quieter as of late, save for the Dallas game. So your immediate thought is, well, yeah, they've cooled down, they've regressed. And that, as a small aside, is all totally normal. Players like that are going to go through ebbs and flows throughout the season. So it's not a panic, that Larkin and DeBrincat aren't scoring at elite rates. Alex DeBrincat didn't score for the first 36 games of the season. Now he's on pace for 120 goals. It balances out over time. But I think not that they've been world beaters, but we've kind of forgot about how much some of the other guys have been doing at 5-on-5. JVR's got his power play goals, but he's got some goals at 5-on-5. Rasmussen's got some. Andrew Copp's been playing a lot better. So not that those guys are going to make up for when DeBrincat and Larkin and Raymond drop off, but they sure help buoy it when it happens. And I think that's a little bit of what's happening here. And again, it's such a small sample size because, again, talking about the Utah game, I was in the building for that game and nobody was good that game. The whole team was flat. It was awful. But then again, they come back against Washington, string together a couple really good games, and then that completely cancels out all the bad stats that they accumulated in the Utah game. So it's just the ebbs and flows. And I think we just, as a collective fan base, always have a habit of looking at one extreme or the other. And yeah, I would not have predicted top 10, but I also probably would not have predicted bottom 10.
No, you're right. And I think some of those guys in particular of late, like Andrew Copp is on pace now for above a half point per game, which that's what you want from him for sure. But it wasn't where he was at, a while back. He's 12 points in his last 12 games. So that's a huge surge from him in that second line. That's been, we saw it last year when he was up there between Kane and DeBrincat. He has a good fit there. And even with Kane out and John Leonard there, I think he's played his best hockey there next to DeBrincat. So I don't know if that's, the confidence that comes with an elevated role. If it's like, there's some of it is definitely a chemistry thing. Like he drives the middle, he can go get pucks for them, but he's also smart enough to think the game the way that players like that think the game. But there's clearly a fit there for him next to DeBrincat.
Last 10 games played, the top 3 Red Wings in 5-on-5 points. I'm pulling this from Money Puck. Andrew Copp, Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, all with 7 points. Stands to reason that line has been electric, and you're certainly John Leonard's been great for what they've needed him to do, but you are missing Patrick Kane at this point. Followed by Axel Sandin-Pellikka, JVR. Lucas Raymond has 3 5-on-5 points in his last 10 games. Michael Rasmussen has 3. Edvinsson has 3. Marco Kasper has 2. Soderblom has 2. Danielson has 2. JT Compher has 2. Seider 2. Leonard 2. Appleton 2. Larkin and Finnie are tied for 16th with 1 5-on-5 point in their last 10 games played.
So yeah, that is a red flag on the top line there, right? Something is off. Again, you talked about I would like to see Kasper get a longer look with that top line, and I think could get him going. I think it could get Larkin and Raymond a little jolt just because newness brings that, right? McLellan has talked about getting stale. One of the issues with it has been that Finnie has been good, and you don't want to take a young player who's playing well and pull the rug from under him because you want to reward good play from a young player like that. But you can still get him some power play time, power play 2. It doesn't mean that you have to frame it as a punishment or cut his ice time in half or whatever, right? You can still find places to use Emmett Finnie. I just think that there is value in trying to spark Marco Kasper, and right now there's value in trying to spark that top line.
Fully agree, and I've mentioned on previous episodes, it's a tough spot for sure because Finnie not only has been playing well, based on expectations. I also know that Larkin in that line, they like the way Finnie plays. They want someone quick to play with them, and they largely find that he puts himself in the right places. He's definitely figuring things out in terms of matching their level of skill and creativity, which he doesn't have at a raw level, but you can still find a way to work with that. And they want him to develop into that kind of guy where it's maybe he's not that elite level talent player that Raymond or Larkin are, but he still is a contributor, a piano puller, or whatever you want to call it. That's a really useful archetype in the NHL. But I extend this analysis back to the last 20 games, and Finnie still has 3 points 5-on-5 in his last 20. Larkin has 5 points 5-on-5 in his last 20. And at some point, I agree. I think the production has to get there, and it is not a winning strategy to continue to rely on, odd man situations or 3-on-3 overtime to get that production. The top line, we've seen what they've been able to do. It could just be a temporary stint, right, to get Kasper going. Ideally, this is like a cold start diesel engine. Kasper gets going with some production up there, and then all of a sudden he's able to center a line again. You get the mental snafus out of the way, and his confidence is back. And then maybe it's Finnie back in. But I watch this, and I'm like, is this Finnie? Is this a Larkin cold streak, which does happen? I don't know. Is this just because they save all their deployment for primarily power play situations, and that's just the best execution of your best weapons? But it's great that Kane, DeBrincat, and Copp are going so well, but they can't be your best line for this long, especially because Patrick Kane has been out for a bunch of games now.
Well, what's interesting is, 2 things. One, I think Finnie has been maybe the most noticeable of those 3 at 5-on-5 for stretches of these 10, 15 games. I think he's playing pretty good hockey, doing the things that he does well. It's just not leading the points, whether that's because of Larkin and Raymond, whether that's somewhat fluky. There's probably somewhere in the middle. So that's part of it, is I don't think Finnie's dipped, and that makes it tough. But I think, Kat, to your point about the archetype that Finnie plays and why it fits with Larkin and Raymond, I think it's Kasper's archetype. In camp, I remember we were talking about him as kind of a mini Marco and not in size, just a younger Marco, right? And by a year. And so I think there's a lot of rhyme in those two guys' game. I think Kasper has a little more natural skill. Finnie's a little bit faster, but pace is still a big part of Kasper's game, at least his A game, right? Maybe you can argue that on some nights this year, pace hasn't been where it was for the second half of last season. But when Marco Kasper is at his best, it looks a whole lot like when Emmett Finnie is at his best. And so even if it is the other guys, I think there is value in putting him there and knowing that he can do a lot of the same role, and it just shakes things up a little bit. We see that. McLellan has used the word stale at times to talk about a line that he's breaking up, and you need something to freshen it back up. Doesn't mean you're not going to go back to it in 5 games, 10 games, whatever. But, he can check all the same boxes, is my point.
So we'll see how the Red Wings go. We'll see if they keep Kasper up there. I mean, regardless, I still place Kasper's, very slow season so far, to put it gently, as a bigger story than a cold streak 5-on-5 on the top line. But both are very important storylines, and you have to take advantage of nights where your defense, your top pair, has been one of the best in the league. You're getting great goaltending from John Gibson. You can't afford to have something that should be a free square, the bingo cards, start to fall away. These are the kinds of things you need to keep in check. So come February, on either side of the Olympic break, and then after that, when the playoff push really goes in earnest, you are not already out of the mix because of something that you didn't, keep afloat beforehand. So all eyes on what the Red Wings do moving forward. Let's go back to some other conversations we've had, I think, in the last couple of Good in the Room versions of the Winged Wheel podcast with you, Max. But we have to start here with John Gibson. And you get to take a little bit of a victory lap, because I was saying, and many others were saying, like, something has to give, and I'd like to see Sebastian Cossa sometime soon if something doesn't change. And you're like, hold on. It's kind of silly to say, let's have change now. Let's just see how it goes. You need to give him some time, and you couldn't have been more right.
I can't even call it a victory lap, because I didn't know it was going to happen. Certainly not to this extent. I don't even know that I thought it was going to happen, but I just felt like you make this investment and it starts off rough. You kind of owe it to all involved to give it a chance to correct before you just close the file and, yep, it's a failure, it's done. I just felt like you wanted to give it a chance to correct. And I don't know that it's going to keep up at this level, right? Like, he's a .922 goalie so far in December as we record this. If he's that, the Red Wings are going to have a really, really good season. But there's very few goalies in the league who can sustain that kind of production. And, granted, John Gibson has been one at times in his career, but I still think that's on the very high end of what is reasonable for him. But I think, even last night, it's a tough Carolina team. I think he was good enough to give them a chance in that game. And so my view on Gibson is basically okay, he's back to being a viable starter. Doesn't mean that I don't think Sebastian Cossa has also earned a look this year, and the Red Wings are going to have to figure that out, right? But I think the fact that they didn't give up on him, they didn't punt on him, allowed him the chance to find his footing, and now he's a viable option, and that's the best thing for them, period. Maybe that Cossa still gets games. I think that he still should, but you have a goalie now in John Gibson who you feel good about most nights when he's starting.
Yeah, through the Dallas game, that was 8 straight wins, and it was a .927 save percentage in that time. So you watch that, and I agree. I think he was a goalie that was giving you a chance. There was times, periods, where he absolutely saved the Red Wings' butts, and there's games where it's he didn't really have to be anything other than, solid, but he was throughout that. And that's all the Red Wings need. You certainly ask for more, for sure, but you don't put the cart before the horse here. They're getting something from John Gibson that they haven't had consistently for this stretch of time. I think it was 14, 15 years since Chris Osgood, 8 straight wins. So yeah, if Gibson can continue to do this, then that is a big piece of the puzzle that is, at least for the time being, in place. Talbot had a good game or two in there as well, and so you like to see that, but you're going to want to see more consistency that way. But credit to Gibson. I think he's playing a more settled game. He's still a very, every moment that's a big moment for the other team feels a little bit like a 3-act play, the way that puck stays out of the net sometimes, but he is finding a way to make those saves, and he's playing a more settled game. I think we were talking with Prashant about, he's not playing so far out of position in his net, and he's a little bit more, glued to his set areas in terms of goaltending fundamentals. And is that a comfortability thing? Is that just, shaking off the rust and getting used to playing behind this defense? Whatever it may be, it does seem to be working out well. Well, we're going to talk about Cossa in a minute, but I also agree that that's going to have to,
What's interesting with Gibson, and this might be true to an extent with Cossa too, I don't know, but like with Gibson, certainly, you mentioned those like kind of the keeping the puck out of the net and the 3-act play. Like, I think I like him better in those sustained like minute and a half of ozone time for the opponent, where he's a competitor and he's just kind of battling to get in front of a puck, get a piece of it, knock it away. Then maybe like a 2-on-1 situation. Maybe that's true of all goalies. I don't know if maybe this is as notable as I thought it was as I started talking, but like, I don't know that he's going to react and make that pretty glove save that you want in the same way that he's going to just continue to find a way to get in front of a puck. And there's something to be said for that. Now, granted, there's something to be said against that when you're a team that gives up a fair number of odd man rushes, but that's an interesting kind of component to his game that I almost feel like the more shots he's seeing, the more in rhythm he is. Like, I got to get this one. Now I got to get this one. I almost think you like him better there.
At the start of the year, Ryan, you looked like a radicalist with your extremely hot take about saying John Gibson would turn back the clock and be a Vezina-level goalie. And it wasn't looking great for you for so long. But, I think I'm coming around. I think I'm starting to see the light. I'm starting to see the John Gibson that you thought you saw.
Again, I still feel like this is a trap, much like you demanding that hottest of hot takes prompt, which I don't know why I fell into, but like I tweeted at you, Evan, I wasn't insane. I was just insanely early. That's what I'm going to go with for now.
The tough thing with goalies is that I feel like if you assess them every week or month or whatever, you are extremely liable for it to flip on you completely every week or month. And so, hey, on January 28th, we may be doing the opposite show of like, oh, we got fooled. That's just how it goes with goalies.
I remember my preseason analysis of the Eastern Conference and the Atlantic. I was talking about Ottawa. I was like, a big part of their success was Linus Ullmark, and he is very like historically one of those every other year goalies, and it's always the opposing year of Jeremy Swayman that seems to hold even when they're not on the same team. He sucks this year. He's one of the worst goalies statistically in the NHL this year, and it's a big reason why Ottawa is not where they think they should be. You can't predict this. You can't.
I'm getting a fell forward award on Ullmark and the Senators because I was bullish on them this year. I was like picking them to make the Final Four, and he was a big reason for it. Is because every time I watched them last year, Linus Ullmark was like amazing, and they have this great young core growing into its prime, really on the same timeline as the Red Wings, right? Like Jake Sanderson is one of the league's elite defensemen. Tim Stützle is very good, and down the middle, Stützle Cousins is really impressive with the right kind of veteran mix. And I was like, yeah, this is a team that's gonna, jump up into kind of the thick of the pack. And what's funny is like the skaters have kind of validated that, but Ullmark's been that terrible that Ottawa, it just, they may still make the playoffs, but I'm not nearly as confident in them as I was in mid-September.
Yeah, in a season where Jake Sanderson is really getting a lot of very deserved attention as one of the best young defensemen or one of the best defensemen in the NHL period. It's like, oh yeah, but it doesn't matter because the goaltending just completely sucks. It's very Red Wings coded. We're quite familiar with that. So John Gibson is one side of this. I want to go to something else that you mentioned in one of your pieces on the Athletic Detroit Max, which was a potential trade target. It was an article where every single team, you took a look at what a smart trade target would be for them after the NHL holiday trade freeze, the roster freeze, which has now been lifted. And you mentioned Justin Faulk. And I thought that was a really interesting one because we always get the question of who around the NHL could potentially be a trade target for the Red Wings. And the answer is like, there's a myriad of guys who could fit that bill, but the NHL just doesn't work in a way where there's always a decided amount of guys who are, available via trade. And it's harder once you get to those middle six players in terms of who would be a smart ad because there's so many of them. But I thought Faulk was a really interesting one. So talk us through that a little bit and why you think he could be a good ad and what it would cost.
Yeah, turning back the clock a little bit to when there was a Justin Faulk Red Wings question seemingly every week in like 2018, 2019, back when he was with Carolina. No, I mean, he's obviously on the older side, and I can understand if there are fans out there who are like, another 33-year-old defenseman, that's what's going to take this thing to the next level? But I think the key is that the Red Wings, I'd say bottom pair, but you could even say bottom half of their defense, I think, is still a vulnerability. And you see it. Look, Johansson had a great year last year. I don't know that I've been quite as, I don't know what the word would be, impressed, like comfortable with like kind of his shifts certainly of late, but over the course of the year, there's a steadiness to his game that I feel like you came to appreciate that I just haven't felt in the same way this year. Like I feel like his pair, whether it's with Hamonic or Bernard Docker, has found a way to get hemmed in too often. And I still think even as good as Sandin-Pellikka has been over the last stretch, when it gets to March, April, certainly playoff hockey, it's going to be tough for him, I think, to withstand some of those forechecks as a rookie. In time, I think he's absolutely going to grow into that. So that leaves me to believe that what the Red Wings need is a 4-5 defenseman. And Justin Faulk is playing much higher than that in the lineup. He's playing 22, 23 minutes a night right now. But I think if you brought him in, you would see his underlying numbers, his territorial numbers shoot up, as he's a guy who I think could take third pair minutes next to Albert Johansson and start to crush them. And then as the season wears on, you could go to him and maybe move him up with Ben Sherratt as more of like a classic playoff second pair. Look, Faulk has had a dip like recently in his career, but I think this year there's been an improvement. And even if it's expected goals wise, maybe not quite where you'd want it to be, the actual goals numbers are pretty good. The production is pretty good. And again, I think if you were able to shelter him, he's a guy that I think could make a really positive impact for them. Plus, you have the Detroit-St. Louis pipeline, which works both ways, as we're seeing with Jonathan Berggren over there. But that's easy travel for everybody. That's easy, deal making between Steve Yzerman and Doug Armstrong. I also think it'd be cheaper than a Rasmus Andersson, which I know is a popular name out there. So that's how I arrived at Faulk. And I don't know, what did you guys think?
I looked at it and I was like, I really would prefer a top 4 left shot defenseman, but I like the thesis for Faulk, and Rasmus Andersson would just be too much money for something that long term, too much money and too many assets, I should say, for something long term that isn't exactly the right fit for Detroit. Not that they'd be a worse team, they'd be a much better team.
Or a guarantee. Like you may be trading, maybe just like the Houston, you may be trading for him and just hoping he wants to sign.
Totally. And with Faulk, I was like, I like the fit for sure. And I think everywhere in Detroit's bottom 4 could use help. I'd prefer a top 4 left shot defenseman. But then I thought about, if this Red Wings team makes the playoffs, which right now they are well on track to do, I hate to say it, but it's the reality. Axel Sandin-Pellikka is going to get bullied. That is going to be part of the game plan for the other team. And barring him having a massive physical change between now and April, they are likely to be successful if they zero in on that. Not to say he's going to suck, but it's going to be a physical challenge for him. Look at how Albert Johansson played last year in increased minutes. He had to go through a physical toll, and Sandin-Pellikka is younger and less equipped than Johansson was last year physically to handle that. And so you need to protect that and shelter it a little bit. So by adding someone like Faulk who can eat some tougher minutes, and I think you even wrote this, Max, you can shelter Sandin-Pellikka so you still get more out of him offensively and in the right situations, but then you have a guy who knows how to play the game, can bring that veteran stability and really solidify the right side. And then that could have the cascade effect on the left side as well, where you see an improvement there. So I actually quite like the thought. And I mean, minute munching defensemen don't come cheap, but he has a big contract too. Like his number isn't exactly the easiest to fit in, even with an increased salary cap. He's at $6.5 million, but the Red Wings can fit that in. I know they're trying to think about Patrick Kane's bonus money and things like that, but the Red Wings can fit that in quite easily, and that might help them be able to acquire him with not too much pain.
We should talk about costs here, right? Because I think as I was looking at the comments in that article, like there were some St. Louis fans that are like, yeah, first round pick for Faulk. I would not pay a first round pick for Justin Faulk here, right? But the Red Wings do have a surplus of like young, near NHL defensemen that I would be willing to deal from if I was them, right? Especially to get a now upgrade. And, you're not going to be able to get all of, William Wallinder, Shai Buium, those guys all into the lineup in the next year or two. So if St. Louis, who's in much more of a place to take on that kind of a player, would want a, recent second round pick who's knocking on the door of the NHL, and maybe you can add another pick to that, third or whatever, a second to make it make sense. That's the kind of price that I think I would be willing to pay for a year and a half of Justin Faulk, but I would not go into the premium asset range. So I don't think you would have to. That's my read, but maybe I'm off on that.
Well, him being expensive is the plus for the Red Wings, because that's going to knock a lot of contenders out of the running, because they can't just eat, 6 point whatever million it is. And the Red Wings can, and retention costs. So like if you're a Dallas and you're like, give me Justin Faulk, but you need half retained, well, that alone is probably a second round pick right there, which might be more appealing to St. Louis depending on what their ownership wants to pay or not pay. But Detroit could go, we'll give you a third-round pick, but we'll take the full hit for both years. Depending on what else is going around in the league, sometimes that's a huge advantage when it comes to acquiring a player, being able to take on a guy full pop.
I don't think they get him for a third straight up. I think it'd be like a third and a prospect, right? Or even a second and a prospect. But I don't think, to me, he's not a first-round pick kind of guy. Maybe I'm off on that. I mean, guys with reputation and pedigree sometimes do command more than you think. I think back to what Ben Sherratt fetched for Montreal when he was traded. But I don't think he has quite the physical element that is what made Ben Sherratt worth that pick to the Florida Panthers, or at least made him command that pick. You can argue whether it was worth it for them, certainly. But again, like I think you're going to have to pay for him, but it's not going to be, to me, a premium asset. And if it is, then I would change my answer on what I would target.
I think the nice thing about Justin Faulk is he's only under contract for another year. So you bring him in. If it works, great. Then you can renegotiate to see if you want to keep him in. He'll be 35 at the end of this deal. You'll probably get him on the cheap. And then you know if he's a good fit in this organization. If he's not, well, you only have him under contract for one more year and you can move along. So for me, if the acquisition cost is low, it makes a lot of sense because it still provides you a lot of flexibility with not a huge cap hit. I know 6.5 for a 1+ year rental probably makes some people feel uneasy, but with the way the cap's going, like $6.5 million is going to be pretty standard defenseman salary going forward. So I like the idea. I know a lot of people have talked about Marcus Pettersson as well, but he's under contract for a long time. So if the fit is not there, then I don't want to say stuck, but you've got someone you have to try and move out from. So I think Justin Faulk makes a lot of sense, not just from the player perspective, but from an asset management perspective as well.
I would also expect a dramatically higher acquisition price for Marcus Pettersson because it's a cheaper contract. I think he's a younger player. I think he's a better player, or at least he's a more like steady player right now. So I would expect you'd have to pay more for Marcus Pettersson than you would for Justin Faulk. Also, like the thing I'm thinking about with Justin Faulk, to your point, Evan, like it kind of reminds me a little bit of Nick Leddy even, where if you get him and the fit doesn't work out or it just doesn't, circumstances change, you could just trade him again like the Red Wings did with Nick Leddy. And maybe that's how you approach this too, is like, you're like, okay, well, you get the one playoff run with it. And if you like that, then you still have him for another year, kind of as a bridge to Anton Johansson, who I would imagine within a year and a half is at least knocking on the door, if not kicking it down for the Red Wings to play on their third pair or whatever. So again, it's the one I like, and I certainly think it would be cheaper than Marcus Pettersson.
All right, jumping into some other Red Wings notes here. First, we should say the Red Wings prospects are playing in the World Juniors, which are underway right now. I'll open by saying it's very good to see that Cole Hudson's doing okay after a very scary situation last night. That was not fun to see. And so thankful that Cole's is doing well, already discharged from the hospital. But the Red Wings prospects playing that tournament, Carter Bear for Team Canada, Max Plant is probably the prospect a lot of people have their eyes on the most, playing for Team USA, same level of, I think, excitement and performance relative to their league. Eddie Genborg, who's having a great year in Sweden, playing for Team Sweden. And then in the Slovakian lineup are Michael Prodl and Michael Sverchek, the two Red Wings prospects there from the third and fourth round of the last draft. So those are the Red Wings prospects playing the World Juniors. All eyes on those guys. And speaking of the Red Wings system, the Grand Rapids Griffins, 26-1-0-1, the best record through 28 games in the 90-year history of the AHL. Sebastian Cossa, his fourth shutout of the year last night to send him to their 15th straight win. That was Dan Watson's 100th win. He was the second fastest coach to reach that mark, 172 games. Again, if you guys need any excuse to go to Win Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins, it's all for you right there. Like, you're just going to watch unbelievable hockey. It feels like we talk about this every time you're on, Max, but the Griffins are just on a whole other level right now. Thoughts on how the Griffins have been going?
Well, I really only been able to see them live once this year, and I don't think it was one of their better games. It was a game that they kind of had to find a way in. They gave up 4 goals, which if you look at their numbers is like an extreme outlier. Their goaltending has been outstanding, whether it's been Sebastian Cossa, who's at a .940, which is a ridiculous number, one of the very best in the AHL. Carter Gylander in his 7 games is at a .943. Dustin Tokarski has given them some good games. Michael Postava has given them some good games. Like, This is a team that defensively and in net is as good as it gets in the American Hockey League. And then you have these like veterans, right? And I talked about this in my article, but it's amazing to me that you can have like Eric Gustafsson and Justin Hall, like fringy NHL players, but NHL players nonetheless. So when you can have both of them in your lineup in the AHL, you see the difference in the leagues by the damage that they can do and the difference that they can make in a league like that. Dominic Shine, Sheldon Dries, right? Like these are guys, John Leonard when he was down there. These are all guys who at various times have been top AHL players or kind of bubble NHL guys, and you have enough of them, you just really do see the difference. Like it's that they have some advantages that other teams do not. And I know that there are Red Wings fans listening to this like, great, so none of this matters for the Red Wings because it's all veterans. That's not really true either. Michael Brandsegg-Nygard has been one of the best rookies in the AHL this season. Sebastian Cossa is one of your top goalie prospects. He's been, like I said, one of the very best goalies. It's him and Sergei Murashov at the top of the AHL goaltending charts. So among qualified goaltenders, I should say. I mean, I know I said Gylander has actually a slightly higher save percentage than Cossa, but it's in like half as many games. So there are really impressive things happening down there, and we should note this is all with Amadeus Lombardi and Shai Buium out, and Carter Mazur out. Like Lombardi, I would imagine, is back fairly soon here. My impression when I was down there last was that they were expecting him sometime after Christmas, so maybe you're kind of watching for that now a little more closely. They could get even better when those guys get back.
It took me a while to get back on track after you brought up Dustin Tokarski. We just talked about the World Juniors. Tokarski! Pierre Maguire just absolutely losing it. Double Dion came into my mind. But no, you're completely right. And I think the story of this outside of the NHL level players or fringy NHL players driving a lot of the stability that keeps them in games and just shuts down much worse offenses in the AHL than the NHL is Cossa, is Gylander, is Postava. And like when we talk about the Red Wings goaltending pipeline being the best or one of the best in the league, it's like it's not just Cossa and Augustine arguably being the top two non-NHL goalie prospects or whatever you want to call it right now in the world. It's the Gylander. It's you look at all the other players, Guimond down the pipeline, like they have guys through and through, and then they bring in guys like Postava. Like there's so much depth there, and it gives you confidence as to what they're going to do after Gibson and Talbot, but also gives you confidence of like teams are going to take notice of this and they're going to want a piece of that. And that's maybe how you pivot into trading for a key player in the future too. So you can go in any direction here, but through and through, this is just a massive victory for the Red Wings organization that Grand Rapids has been so phenomenal. And credit to Dan Watson for what he's done.
And you're going to put your prospects, your Brandsegg-Nygards, your Lombardis of the world, your Wallanders of the world, in situations where they're used to winning hockey looks and feels like. And I think that we've talked about that, and sometimes it gets like poo-pooed a little bit because it's like, well, how much of it carries over? I think that there are attitudes and there are habits and there are just kind of like philosophies on the ice that do absolutely translate. When you're playing on a winning hockey team and everyone is kind of pulling the rope in the same way, I do think that those are good mindsets and habits to build in your young players that you will see benefit from. Maybe it's not, obviously they're not going to come up and set the culture for the NHL team on day one, but you want that kind of in their MO by the time they get to you.
So credit to the Griffins and what they've been doing. But yeah, this is all, again, no Leonard for the last bunch of games, and Buium was going to be a big part of that team. And Lombardi always is a big part of that offense when he's healthy. Like there's just so much that they're, battling through missing key players. Remarkable to see. All right. On that note, we're going to take another quick break here. And when we're back, the final segment on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, back after this.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, again, the bonus episodes, the Discord, the giveaways, Evan's home mailing address, those are just some of the benefits that you get, and you allow us to do everything that we do, including Winged Wheel Podcast nights with the Grand Rapids Griffins coming up next, January 17th. GriffinsHockey.com/WWP to get your tickets, come into town and see the Griffins play if you haven't yet. And if you're close by and you go to a lot of those games, you know exactly how much fun they are. You might be able to catch Evan and I fumbling around town, wandering into random restaurants, bars, people's living rooms, etc.
The big question is John Leonard going to be at Winged Wheel Pod Night, or is he just going to still be in Detroit by then?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. for my money, Patrick Kane will be back by then, you'd hope, but that doesn't necessarily mean that John Leonard will be. So we'll see. All right, let's take some questions from our patrons. Jeremy Dahl says, why are the Red Wings such a bad first period team, and why do they pick it up so much in the second? I saw a stat somewhere that they are one of the better second period teams in the league.
It's weird because I don't think they've had they've had definitely some flat-footed, slow starts where you're like, okay, they didn't start on time. They've also had some games where I felt like, oh, they've forechecked a ton, a lot of ozone time, and just didn't accomplish. They didn't get on the board from it. So it's a mixed bag. I don't know that I would say there's like one true thing, but certainly they do not score nearly enough in the first period, particularly at home.
The Real K Brown says, waited for a Max episode to get his thoughts on this as well. What's the number one stat each of you look at first when evaluating success for an individual and for a team? Merry Christmas. It's a good question. I mean, the cheap answer here is that I don't look at one individual stat, at least for individual players. Like, I think that is narrowing it down too much. I'll say for a team, if you're looking to see broadly how a team is doing, once you're a good way into the season, I think goal differential does tell a big story. You can look at, expected goals shares over the course of those games as well. Goaltending, an individual stat for a team-wide analysis will also tell a big story, funny enough. But for an individual player, I don't know that I can narrow it down to just one.
If we said the first place that I look, it is probably expected goal share. Like, that's the first top line thing I'm looking at to see, like, okay, what is the run of play like generally when they're on the ice? But then you just need to add context to it, right? So some guy like Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, I believe, is a perfect example of this. I think he still has like a 60% expected goals share from his time up with the Red Wings, and it got him sent down. But if you look at the context to it, it was not against the very toughest competition. I should check that. I don't know that for a fact, but my guess is it was probably not against the very toughest competition out there, and certainly there was no production to go with it. So then that colors it, right? So then you go into your next questions. Okay, well, was there some luck? Was there some PDO stuff going on? Most of the time, to Ryan's point, you're looking at multiple stats. Actually, Brandsegg-Nygard's quality of competition was pretty high, so that is notable as well. So just wasn't able to produce in it, and I think they probably just wanted him watching the games. He was not at the pace that he needed to be at, but his line was able to still have success with him out there. But that's kind of my process generally, is I'll look at, I kind of already know the points just because I'm at every game pretty much, or watching every game. And then you look at the underlying numbers, and then you look at the context stuff like, quality of competition, PDO, stuff like that to give you the full picture.
I'll stick to wins, points, and plus minus. Thank you.
Wins is such a baller answer. Wins is an amazing answer.
Oh man, it's the bell curve meme. So wins, points, and plus minus, and in the middle it's everything that Max and I just said, and the wise guys, wins, points, and plus minus, baby.
Yeah, Mickey, no need to overthink it, right?
Yeah. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. Says, hi guys, as you all have covered, the Griffins are still on a heater with another Cossa shutout tonight. It's been mentioned before that having veterans on defense in Grand Rapids has played a large part in their hot start. My question is, how much of Cossa's start can be attributed to the D in front of him? He's certainly taken another step forward and may be ready to get some NHL action, but should some of his stats not be taken at face value because of how good the team in front of him is playing? And we talked about it a little bit, but it deserves a little bit of depth here. It's a good point, and one that people will be asking.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to put it on context, right? Like if he had a 940 and every other goalie on the team was at like a 904, we're having a different conversation, and probably a more urgent, like, this guy needs to be in the NHL conversation. That being said, I don't think it completely invalidates the success either, right? Like it's not the case that you can just play behind this defense and no pucks that do get through will ever go in, right? Like it does help that I think they're being put in favorable situations, but he is also stopping the puck. And at the end of the day, that is what you want your goalie to do. But yeah, I would say that the 940 looks a little differently when every goalie on the team is 929 or better. I also think when I was down there and I talked to people who have played in front of him, who've coached him, right? Like they also talk about how good he's been. And so it's making an impression on them. And look, we're all human. We all get colored by the things that Brad said, wins and losses, goals against, right? Like when you're playing in front of a goalie and he's not giving up any goals, you're probably like, yeah, he's been amazing. And, maybe there are underlying numbers that need context too. I don't happen to have those for the AHL. I'm sure someone does if you have an in-stat subscription or whatever else. But yeah, no, I think he has been good, but that it is very relevant context.
The Gyms says, hey boys, happy holidays. So are you looking to revise your preseason predictions? Lots of games to go, and I think we all have the same anxiety and questions asking if they can stay firmly in the playoff race while facing the second hardest schedule in the back half of the season. It's a good point, and one that I should have brought up in the show. They do have one of the toughest remaining schedules for the rest of the season. I'm at the point now where I think it was 91 or 92 points. I'm like, I'm willing to revise that up at least a few points for sure. I think the biggest thing for me isn't just the points they've put on the board. It's they've done it with, for a lot of this, pretty bad goaltending. Like, yes, Gibson has had a phenomenal 9-game stretch here, but before that, it was a pretty poor goaltending statistically across both goaltenders. So yeah, I'm very happily revising my predictions up a few points if I could go back in time.
Yeah, I might tick it up a little bit. I not at the point yet where I think that the playoffs are a lock, but optimism is definitely higher. I'm not actually that worried about strength of schedule. I know it's purely anecdotal, but the Red Wings always strike me as a team that play up to their opponents and play down to their opponents. Like I said, they're well above 500. I've been to 3 games in person this year. They're 0-2-1, and those losses were Utah, Nashville, and Buffalo. So, I might be a little biased based on those results.
Well, in that spirit, I'll up my prediction only if Brad promises he's not coming to any more games, because it sounds like that's the difference in their outcomes. I had him at 92 coming in, and for them to get to 92, they would have to be just barely above 500 the rest of the way. So I would tick that up more to 95, 96. I think that probably gets you in, but it's not a total guarantee.
I think I had 89, so I think I'd, kind of split the difference, say 93, 94 points. I think I was maybe one of the most pessimistic about the Red Wings outcome, but I think that was more of a show me what you're going to do versus any sort of deep insights.
Yeah, the complicated thing here is that it's still really early in the season in terms of what they have to come, because the grind starts to accelerate at almost like a logarithmic rate as you get past New Year's. And then you also have the Olympic break this year where your best players are going and playing in this tournament, which count for exactly 0 NHL standings points. And so you have to be cognizant of that in terms of you have big hurdles to get through that no matter how well you played or how poorly you played before those games, it doesn't matter. How you handle those hurdles is only going to be observed once you get there. So how they come out of the Olympic break absolutely is something that I have my eyes on. And what they do as the slog of the season, like we're 39 games in. It's been a story-packed season, so it feels long, but we're still only 39 games in. Let's see how we are at game 50, 55, 65, because that's kind of been where the Red Wings have thrown it in the past. So it's a little bit of cautious optimism. They're on pace for 99 points right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get there, but you're not going to hand them those points until they do it in the toughest moments. I also would wager that most Red Wings fans would feel similar, where they're not counting their chickens before they hatch here.
Can you say that all again? I had to do some Googling when you said logarithmic, and I missed everything else.
Yeah, I thought you were serious there for a second. Am I today's
Max
dweeb?
is just
Am I the
Googling,
nerd?
is logarithmic some sort of William Lagesson-based stat?
That's right.
Is Ryan wrong or just a massive nerd?
I tried 3 different spellings. Eventually, I got there.
Did you see the chart where the line started to go up quicker?
If you
and
just
quicker?
said line go up, I would have known what you were saying.
Yeah, that's for our stock market bonus episode. We're like the inverse Kramer. You just pick against us and you'll have made a lot of money. Then you don't have to be on a stupid podcast. All right, next question here. That's for the Wall Street bet sickos. Next question here from Chunkus Dunkus says, do you think Hall and Gustafsson still want to be moved to another NHL team or continue to ride the wagon in Grand Rapids with the chance of a call-up? That's tough. Like, you never want to say exactly what a guy's thinking, but I mean, rule of thumb, I think guys want to be in the show more than anything else. It's got to be fun, at least for, if you're going to be in the AHL, that's about the best situation you can ask for, but you would imagine they will want to be on an AHL team.
Yeah, like perfect best case scenario, you're in the NHL somewhere. Next best scenario is probably that someone gets moved out of the picture and they don't have to do this like sitting one of them every 3 or 4 games like they are right now, because at least like then you're playing in the AHL. Worst case scenario is the situation that they each find themselves in 1 out of every 3 or 4 games right now, which is where you're not in the NHL and you're also not even dressed. So I think that's kind of like the hierarchy there. Like, yeah, okay, perfect world, you get to call up to Detroit, but maybe that's not even the perfect world. I mean, the perfect world is wherever you're going to get an opportunity, the best opportunity. Erik Gustafsson could get called up to Detroit and not necessarily be on the power play. It's better for him, I would imagine, to be somewhere where his talents are best utilized. So again, I'm not going to speak for him, but I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Last one here from Rasmussen and Petrie on a 2-0 breakaway. Who do you think had the best D+2 season in Grand Rapids between Kasper, Danielson, and MBN so far? So who have you been most impressed by?
I mean, statistically, it has to be MBN, but play-wise, I liked Danielson last year. It's just that the numbers didn't match it. So I guess it depends on what you're after. Like if you're looking for, I mean, it's also, to Brad's point, you're looking at the team and like the role, and like it's very hard to argue with anyone who's on this team playing a big role on this team as they're 26-1-1. So I guess maybe MBN, but like visually watching Danielson, I always felt like there's a lot of translatable stuff in his game.
All right. On that note, we're going to wrap up this remote episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thank you to Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit for joining us. As always, we'll link Max's work so you can read that. It is always worth the price of admission and is automatic reading for us every morning, or if I'm up late enough when he's hammering things away, it's always a good thing to follow up a Red Wings game with. We're also going to link Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins, griffinshockey.com/WWP. Get your tickets, the game tickets, the pre-game live show, the co-branded merch, which is a signed Grand Rapids Griffins Winged Wheel Podcast puck, limited edition. You get all of that and lots more. On January 17th is the event. So again, griffinshockey.com/WWP. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to help us out, but Patreon's not for you. We know the holiday season is a lot. You can help us out just by subscribing, which is completely free wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you leave a rating, the thumbs up, the heart, a like, a review, all of that really does help us out. And to our name level supporters, we could not have done 2025 without you. And we are wishing you all a very, very happy, safe new year, and see you in 2026. To our name level supporters on Patreon: Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sir Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Martin Norberg, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Glenn Brabham, Rain Dano, Below Average Ball Hockey Goalie, Matthew M. Rice, Darb EQ, Sea Lion, Bingo Bango, Hassam Al-Qassem, Asher Killian, Kaylin Wood, Alex Toger, That's What I Appreciate About You, Derek Enstam, Matt McKay, Andy Hardcore, Sam Bankston, Citizen High Five, R.A., Aaron Hudson, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, The El Cato, Stephen Ortlieb, Jonathan Miller, Give Blood Fight Probert, DJ Denton, Carl Brutina Nanaluski, Jay Gollum, John Ingalls, CB55, Connor Scovey, Adam Zuiza, Adam Rose, I Miss Puce Suter, Steve R., Hockeytown Matt, Mr. Kuzi, Chaotic Monkey, Craig Kibble, Plan Stan, Clip Clop, Nay. Now I have to learn how to click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, Unapologetic Gibson Truther, Griffin, Not From Grand Rapids, Marty, Kazi, the OG13, Jeff Pridemore, Eric Hill, Butts Carlton, Best James Bond, Beer League Legend, Alec, Mark Hernandez, Slim Smitty Cards, Grand Rapids Girly, Anna Sleeman, William, Kip Tira Jr., Mike Asher, Chris Black, August, Brian Munn, Improved But Flawed, Chris 99 Jones, Putting on the Moritz, Trevor Centerfit, Adams, Red Wings Takes, Adam Ernie Slander, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Quaz, Dylan Larkin Trade Sacrifice, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Dub Club, Matt Keeler, Linda Hull, Connor Layton, Oz Good As It Jingles, Jeremiah Dobo, Josh Yelton, Brad Simmons, Darren Fick, Bex, The Hodag, Daddy Pastor Jake, The 99 Problems But a Bishop Ain't One. Thank you as always, Reed, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheeseback Space Force, Sandin-Pellikka's Pet Pelican, Griffey Boy, JM Rhapsody, Frank Stanley, Rosie Posey, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Pucking Puck, Carl Thames, Nerno, Stephen, AA Ron, Corey Prida, All Motor No Hands, Gene Sullivan, Dirty D and the Boys, James Pridemore, Upernadian, Drop the Puck, Eric Nance, Ann Stanislavski, Jim, Bellingham Massiballs, our good friend Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, Lucas Raymond, Cop Scump Lip, Trent Thorough, Grepsky, Evan Beckner, Returna Jambo, C.E. Hayes, Finnie to the Rafters, Jacob Marsh, Falkness, Fight Night at the Joe, Axel's Sandy Pelican, The Octopi's Ninth Leg, Finnie the Pooh, Kurt Chin, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. Happy New Year. See you in 2026.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at WingWheelPod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Wingwheel Podcast on Instagram.